The mining station floated in the darkness between stars, a small bubble of light and life in an ocean of nothing. Peter Grant stood at the observation window of the station cafeteria, drinking bad coffee and watching the distant nebula paint purple and blue streaks across the black. He had been working here for 3 years, and the view never got old. Everything else did, but not the view. Behind him, the other miners ate their breakfast in tired silence. The morning shift always started this way. Nobody talked much before the caffeine kicked in. Peter liked it that way. He came out here to the edge of nowhere to get away from noise and people and questions about why a qualified engineer would waste his life on a rock-breaking station that barely paid enough to cover his debts. The alarm changed everything. It started as a low hum that grew into a wailing screech. Red lights flashed in the corridors. The miners jumped from their seats, coffee mugs clattering to the floor. Peter felt his stomach drop. He had heard this alarm exactly once before during the mandatory safety drill when he first arrived. It meant one thing: incoming attack. Station Chief Dana Morris burst into the cafeteria, her face pale. She was a small woman with gray hair and the kind of calm authority that came from 30 years of managing people in dangerous places. Peter had never seen her look scared before. "Everyone to the escape pods," she said. Her voice was steady, but Peter could hear the fear underneath. "Now." "Not a drill." "What's coming?" someone asked. Dana hesitated. "The collectors, a whole fleet of them. Central Command sent the warning 5 minutes ago. They're hitting every station in the sector." The cafeteria erupted into chaos. Miners scrambled for the exits, pushing and shoving. Peter stood frozen, his mind trying to process what he had just heard. The collectors were not supposed to be here. They operated in the core systems where the rich planets were. Out here on the rim, there was nothing worth taking, just rocks and ice and people nobody cared about. Dana grabbed his arm. "Peter, move, we have maybe 10 minutes. He let her pull him toward the corridor. They ran through the narrow passages of the station, following the emergency lights. Other miners rushed past them, heading for the pod bays. Peter could hear someone crying. Someone else was praying in a language he did not recognize. The collectors. Peter had seen the footage like everyone else. Alien machines that harvested entire planets for raw materials. They did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They just took everything and left behind dead worlds. The Galactic Council had been fighting them for 200 years with limited success. The best anyone could do was evacuate and hope the collectors moved on to easier targets. They reached Pod Bay 3. Half the pods were already gone, launched into space by miners who got there first. Dana pushed Peter toward one of the remaining pods. It was a small cylinder barely big enough for 2 people, with just enough fuel to reach the nearest inhabited system 3 days away. "Get in," Dana ordered. "I need to check the other bays." "Come with me," Peter said. "There's room." She shook her head. "I'm the chief, I go last, that's the job." She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Go, Peter, tell them we were here, tell them we mattered." Before he could argue, she hit the launch button. The pod door slammed shut. Peter felt the sudden lurch as explosive bolts fired, throwing the pod away from the station. Through the small window, he watched the mining station shrink into the distance. He could see other pods scattering in all directions like seeds in the wind. Then he saw them. The collector ships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. They were huge, each one the size of a small moon, shaped like irregular polyhedrons covered in strange symbols that seemed to shift and move. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Peter could not count them all. They did not slow down. They did not scan. They just opened fire. Beams of purple energy lanced out from the collector fleet. The mining station exploded in a ball of white fire. The shockwave hit Peter's pod, sending it spinning. He slammed against the restraints, his head cracking against the headrest. Alarms screamed. The pod's computer announced damage to the navigation system in a calm, pleasant voice. Peter fought the controls, trying to stabilize the spin. Through the window, he caught glimpses of the massacre. The collectors were hunting down the escape pods one by one, destroying them with casual efficiency. He watched a pod explode just 100 meters away. Inside that pod had been Lisa Chen, the geologist who always hummed old Earth songs while she worked. Now she was gone, vaporized. Nothing left but atoms. Peter's hands moved on autopilot, his training taking over. He killed the pod's main power, letting it go dark and cold. Maybe if he looked like debris, they would ignore him. It was a desperate plan, but desperation was all he had. The pod drifted in silence. Peter held his breath, watching through the window as a collector ship passed within a kilometer. It was so close he could see details on its surface, strange mechanical structures that looked half-grown and half-built, pulsing with inner light. The ship paused as if sensing something. Peter felt his heart hammering in his chest. Then it moved on. Peter waited for 10 minutes, 20, an hour. The collector fleet finished destroying the station and the pods, then moved deeper into the sector, leaving behind only wreckage and silence. When Peter finally risked bringing the pod's sensors back online, he was alone. Every other pod was gone. The station was gone. Everything was gone. He was the only survivor. Peter floated in the darkness for 3 days. The pod had emergency rations and water, but the navigation system was fried. He could not plot a course to anywhere. He could not even send a distress signal. The communication array had been torn off during the shockwave. All he could do was drift and hope someone found him before his air ran out. He spent the time thinking about Dana Morris, about Lisa Chen and her songs, about the 47 other people who worked on that station. They had been ordinary people doing ordinary work, and now they were dead because they happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Nobody important. Nobody the galaxy would miss. On the 4th day, the pod's sensors detected something. Peter jolted awake from an uneasy sleep. The sensor alarm was beeping softly. He checked the display, expecting to see another collector ship coming to finish the job. Instead, the sensors showed something else entirely, something that should not exist. A structure, massive, artificial, floating in empty space about 200 kilometers from his position. Peter stared at the readings, trying to make sense of them. The structure was huge, at least 10 kilometers across. It was shaped like a ring, or maybe a torus with a hollow center. The sensors could not penetrate its hull to see what was inside. The material was unlike anything in the database. It absorbed all active scans and reflected nothing. The database had no record of anything like this existing in this sector. In fact, the database had no record of anything like this existing anywhere. It was not council technology. It was not collector technology. It was something else. Peter used the pod's maneuvering thrusters to drift closer. It took an hour to cover the distance, burning through fuel he could not spare. But what choice did he have? The pod had maybe 2 days of air left. If this structure had atmosphere, had power, had anything useful, it was his only chance. As he approached, more details became visible. The ring's surface was covered in panels and structures that looked like docking ports, though they were larger than any he had seen before. Strange symbols were etched into the hull, glowing faintly with blue light. Peter did not recognize the language if it was a language. It could have been decorative, it could have been warnings. He had no way to know. One of the docking ports was open. Peter guided the pod toward it, his hands sweaty on the controls. This was insane. This was how people died in horror stories. Ancient alien station, unknown origin, no backup, no weapons. But the alternative was suffocating in a dead pod, so he kept going. The pod slipped into the docking port. Magnetic clamps engaged automatically, locking it in place. Peter heard the hiss of atmosphere equalizing. His pod's sensors confirmed it. Breathable air, Earth normal pressure, comfortable temperature. The station was active. It was waiting. He sat in the pod for a long time, trying to build up the courage to open the door. Finally, he unsealed his environment suit and checked his sidearm. It was a small plasma pistol, designed for scaring off aggressive wildlife on remote planets. Against anything seriously dangerous, it would be useless, but holding it made him feel slightly less helpless. Peter opened the pod door. The docking bay beyond was enormous. The ceiling stretched up into darkness at least 50 meters above. The walls were smooth and featureless except for more of those glowing blue symbols. Lights activated as he stepped out, creating a path across the floor toward an archway at the far end of the bay. "Hello," Peter called out. His voice echoed strangely, as if the acoustics of the space were somehow wrong. No response. He walked toward the archway, his footsteps loud in the silence. The station felt dead but also alive, like something sleeping. Peter had the irrational feeling that he was being watched, though the bay appeared empty. Beyond the archway was a corridor. It curved gently to the left, following the ring's circumference. More lights activated as Peter walked, staying just ahead of him. He followed them for what felt like kilometers. The corridor never changed. Same smooth walls, same blue symbols, same sense of being utterly alone in a place that was waiting for something. Finally, the corridor opened into a chamber. Peter stopped in the doorway, his breath catching. The chamber was circular, maybe 100 meters across. The walls were covered in screens, all of them dark. In the center of the room stood a pedestal with a smooth black surface that reflected the ceiling lights. The room felt important, like a command center or a bridge. Peter approached the pedestal carefully. As he got close, it lit up with blue light. Symbols appeared on its surface, shifting and rearranging themselves. Then, without warning, a hologram flickered to life above the pedestal. It was a human. Peter stumbled backward, nearly dropping his pistol. The hologram showed a woman in her 40s, wearing a dark blue uniform he did not recognize. She had short black hair, tired eyes, and a serious expression. She looked real. She looked alive. But humans had been extinct for thousands of years. Everyone knew that. The woman spoke. Her lips moved, but the words were in a language Peter did not understand. After a moment, the pedestal made a soft chiming sound, and the woman's voice changed to standard galactic common. If you are seeing this message, you have activated one of the Guardian stations. I am Commander Kate Morrison of the Human Defense Fleet. This message was recorded 8,217 years ago by your calendar, just before we left the galaxy. Peter's mind reeled. Humans were real. They had been real. This was proof. The hologram continued. We built these stations as a failsafe, a gift to the species that would come after us. Inside each Guardian station is an automated defense system designed to protect against large-scale threats. The system is completely autonomous and will activate only under specific conditions. She paused, and for a moment her serious expression softened into something sad. We left because we had to. Humanity became too dangerous, too destructive. We nearly destroyed ourselves and almost took the galaxy with us. The only way to stop the cycle was to remove ourselves completely. But we could not abandon you to the threats we knew would come, so we left the Guardians behind. We left them to protect you when we could not. The hologram gestured, and new images appeared, schematics of weapons, star charts, tactical displays. If you need the Guardian network to activate, place your hand on the pedestal and confirm authorization. But understand what you are asking for. The Guardians are weapons of last resort. They are designed to fight threats that cannot be stopped by conventional means. Once activated, they cannot be deactivated until the threat is eliminated. Commander Morrison's image looked directly at Peter, and he felt like she was seeing him across 8,000 years. I hope you never need to activate this system. I hope the galaxy you built is peaceful and safe. But if you are here, if you are watching this, then something has gone very wrong. Trust the Guardians. Trust that we built them to protect, not to harm. And know that even though we are gone, we never stopped caring about the future we left behind. The hologram faded. Peter stood in the silent chamber trying to process everything. Humans were real. They had built this station. They had left it here as protection. And they wanted him to activate it. But activate it against what? The collectors. They were a plague, yes, but the Council had held them off for 2 centuries. They were not an extinction-level threat. Were they? Peter thought about the mining station, about Dana Morris and her calm authority gone in a flash of light, about Lisa Chen and her songs silenced forever, about 47 ordinary people who died for nothing. Then he thought about the collector fleet he had seen. Hundreds of ships, maybe thousands, moving with purpose, heading deeper into Council space. This was not a raid. This was an invasion. And if the collectors were this far out on the rim in such numbers, how many more were hitting the core systems? Peter walked to the pedestal. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the black surface. This felt too big for one person to decide. He was just a miner, an engineer who ran away from his problems to break rocks in the dark. What right did he have to activate an ancient weapons system built by a dead species? But there was nobody else. The station was empty. Earth was gone. Humanity was gone. The council was probably too busy evacuating to even know these stations existed. If Peter did not make this choice, nobody would. He placed his hand on the pedestal. The surface felt warm and alive under his palm. The blue symbols flared bright. A voice spoke, neither male nor female, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Identity scan complete. Species, human derivative. Authorization level, alpha. State the nature of the threat. Peter swallowed. The collectors. They are attacking council space in massive numbers. They destroyed my station. They killed everyone. I think they are going to kill everyone. Collector identification confirmed. Threat assessment critical. Recommendation full Guardian network activation. Do you authorize? Peter closed his eyes. He thought about Dana's last words. Tell them we were here. Tell them we mattered. Yes, he said. I authorize it. Authorization accepted. Activating Guardian network. Time to full operational status, 16 hours. The chamber came alive. The screens on the walls lit up, showing star maps and tactical data. Peter saw hundreds of points of light appearing across the galaxy. Each one, he realized, was a Guardian station like this one. They had been sleeping for 8,000 years, and now they were waking up. The voice continued. Guardian network will engage collector forces and eliminate the threat. Estimated time to threat neutralization. Unknown. Please remain at the station for your safety. You will be contacted when the operation is complete. Peter sank to the floor, his legs suddenly weak. What had he done? He had just activated an automated weapons system built by a species that had abandoned the galaxy because they were too dangerous. He had unleashed something that had been sleeping for millennia, and he had no way to stop it. All he could do now was wait and hope that the humans who built the Guardians had meant what they said about protection. Hours crawled by. Peter explored the station, finding living quarters with beds that fit human proportions, a cafeteria with food synthesizers that still worked, and observation decks with windows looking out into space. The station was designed for a crew, but it operated perfectly with just him. Or maybe it operated perfectly with nobody at all. He tried to contact the outside galaxy, but the station's communication systems were locked. The voice told him it was for security reasons. The Guardians could not risk their positions being revealed before activation was complete, so Peter waited. 16 hours after authorization, the station's alarms went silent. The screens in the command chamber showed the Guardian network fully online. Peter watched as thousands of stations across the galaxy began to move, leaving their hiding places and heading toward collector concentrations. Then the voice spoke again. Guardian network is operational, engaging collector forces. Establishing communication with Galactic Council. One of the screens changed to show a communication channel opening. Peter saw a conference room filled with aliens of various species. They looked panicked and exhausted. In the center was an elderly being with silver skin and 4 arms, wearing ornate robes. The translator identified him as High Counselor Vorn, leader of the Galactic Council. Vorn was speaking urgently to someone off-screen when another hologram appeared in the council chamber. It was Commander Morrison, the same recording Peter had seen, but this time she addressed the council directly. Galactic Council, this is an automated message from the Human Defense Fleet. The Guardian network has been activated in response to a critical threat. Our systems are now engaging collector forces throughout council space. We recommend all civilian populations shelter in place while military operations are underway. The Guardian network will broadcast tactical updates every 6 hours. The council chamber erupted in confusion. Peter could see council members arguing, some standing and shouting. High Counselor Vorn raised all 4 hands for silence. Humans are a myth, Vorn said, his voice shaking. This cannot be real. The hologram of Morrison did not respond. It was a recording after all, but the screens in Peter's command chamber showed the truth. The Guardians were very real, and they were moving to intercept the collectors. Peter watched the tactical displays as the first engagement began. A Guardian station dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly in the path of a collector fleet. The collectors immediately opened fire with their purple energy beams. The beam struck the Guardian's shields and dissipated harmlessly. Then the Guardian fired back. The weapon was unlike anything Peter had seen. It did not fire beams or projectiles. Space itself seemed to bend and twist around the collector ships. One moment they were there, solid and real. The next moment they collapsed inward, crushed by impossible forces into points of light that winked out of existence. 50 collector ships died in the first 10 seconds. Peter felt sick. The power on display was terrifying. This was why humans had left. This was the kind of destructive capability that made them too dangerous to stay. But it was also beautiful in a horrible way. For 200 years, the collectors had been unstoppable. They came, they took, they destroyed, and the galaxy could only run. Now, finally, something was fighting back. Something was winning. The battle spread across the galaxy. Guardian stations engaged collector fleets in dozens of systems simultaneously. The displays showed the collectors trying to adapt, changing their tactics, concentrating their forces. Nothing worked. The Guardian weapons were too advanced, their shields too strong, their coordination too perfect. Within 6 hours, 60% of the collector fleet was destroyed. Peter sat in the command chamber, watching the slaughter. That was what it was, not a battle, a slaughter. The collectors who had terrified the galaxy for centuries were being systematically eliminated by machines built by a species that had been gone for 8,000 years. He felt numb. He had authorized this. He had unleashed the Guardians. Dana Morris and Lisa Chen and 45 others were avenged 1,000 times over. But it did not feel like victory. It felt like watching gods destroy insects. The communication channel to the council was still open. Peter could see the council members watching the same displays he was, their faces showing shock and fear and wonder. High Counselor Vorn looked like he had aged 10 years in 6 hours. The legends were true, someone whispered. Peter could not tell who. After 12 hours, the collector fleet broke. The surviving ships retreated, jumping to faster than light and fleeing toward the galactic rim. The Guardians pursued them relentlessly, hunting them down one by one. There would be no mercy. The system was designed to eliminate the threat completely. Peter finally allowed himself to sleep, exhausted by fear and relief and the weight of what he had done. When he woke, the voice informed him that the collector threat had been neutralized. Every ship destroyed. Every base eliminated. The species that had terrorized the galaxy for 2 centuries was extinct. The Guardians began returning to their stations. The voice told Peter he was free to leave whenever he wished. A shuttle would be provided to take him to the nearest council station. But before he left, Peter had one question. "Why did you call me human derivative?" he asked the voice. "Humans are extinct." The voice was silent for a long moment. Then it said, "All species in council space share genetic markers with baseline humanity. You are descendants of the colonies we established before departure. We did not leave you behind. We left you to grow, to become your own people, free from our shadow, but you are still ours in a way, still family." Peter felt something break inside him. All the species in the galaxy, different and unique and proud of their individual histories, were just children of Earth. Humanity had not gone extinct. They had transformed, evolved, become something new, and then they had left to give their children room to grow. "Where did they go?" Peter asked. "Where are the humans now?" "I do not know," the voice admitted. "That information was not included in my programming, but if you ever need them again, they will hear. The Guardians are connected to something beyond this galaxy. If the call is great enough, they will return." Peter nodded, even though the voice could not see him. He understood now. Humanity had left the galaxy not out of fear or defeat, but out of love. They recognized their own danger and chose exile over destruction. But they had never truly left. They were watching, always watching, through the Guardians they built to protect the children they left behind. The galaxy had called humans a fairy tale, a myth to frighten children and comfort the desperate. But myths, Peter realized, were just truths that people had forgotten how to believe. And sometimes, when you needed them most, the myths came back. 6 months had passed since the Ghost Fleet destroyed the Hunters. The galaxy celebrated its survival with festivals and monuments dedicated to the mysterious humans who had saved them all. But in a small research station orbiting a frozen moon in the outer territories, scientist Linda Cruz was not celebrating. She was panicking. Linda stood in her cramped laboratory, staring at the data streaming across her monitors. Her hands shook as she ran the analysis for the fifth time, hoping desperately that the results would change. They did not. The Ghost Fleet was dying, not all at once and not obviously, but the 37,000 automated platforms that protected the galaxy were experiencing cascading system failures, one platform every 3 days on average. At this rate, the entire fleet would be offline within 300 years. 300 years sounded like a long time, but Linda knew better. The hunters had come back after only 2 centuries of silence. What other threats lurked beyond the galactic rim, waiting for the Ghost Fleet to fail? She had discovered the problem by accident. Linda was not supposed to be studying the Ghost Fleet at all. Her job was researching ancient power systems, trying to understand how early spacefaring civilizations had generated energy. But one of the Ghost Fleet platforms had gone dark near her station, and curiosity had driven her to investigate. What she found inside the silent platform had confused her at first. The technology was incredible, far beyond anything the Council species could build. But there was a critical flaw in the design. The platforms used something called a quantum stability matrix to maintain their weapons and defensive systems. These matrices were degrading slowly, losing coherence at a rate of 0.003% per year. The humans had built the Ghost Fleet to last 8,000 years. It had done so brilliantly, but they had not anticipated it would need to remain functional for 16,000 years total. The matrices were past their operational lifespan. Linda had immediately sent her findings to the Galactic Council. That had been 2 weeks ago. She had received no response. Now she sat in her lab watching another platform fail in the distance. Its lights flickered once, twice, then went dark forever. Platform number 267 gone. Her communication console beeped. Finally, the council was responding. But the face that appeared on her screen was not a council representative. It was human. The man looked young, perhaps 30 in human years, with short brown hair and tired eyes. He wore a simple gray uniform with no insignia. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and careful. "Dr. Cruz, my name is Peter Shaw. I work for the Terran Engineering Corps. We received your report about the quantum matrix degradation." Linda felt her heart racing. She had not expected the humans to respond. They had made it clear they wanted no contact with the galaxy. "You did," she managed to say. "The Council has not acknowledged my findings." Peter smiled sadly. "The Council does not want to acknowledge the problem. They believe that admitting the Ghost Fleet is failing would cause panic. They have classified your report and ordered you to stop your research." "What?" Linda stood up so fast her chair tumbled backward. "But this is critical information. The galaxy needs to know." "I agree," Peter said. "That is why I am contacting you directly. We need your help, Dr. Cruz." Linda sat back down slowly. "What kind of help?" "We need someone to come to human territory and work with our engineers to fix the Ghost Fleet. Someone who understands the problem and can help us develop a solution. The Council will not permit any human ships to enter their space, and we cannot repair the platforms remotely." "You want me to leave the galaxy?" Linda heard the fear in her own voice. "To go to human space? No one has ever done that. No one knows what happens to people who go there." Peter's expression softened. "I understand your concern. Humans are still considered myths and monsters by most species, but I promise you will be safe. We need your expertise, not your fear." Linda looked at her monitors again. Another platform would fail in approximately 72 hours, then another and another, until eventually the galaxy stood defenseless. "How soon do you need me?" she asked. The human ship arrived 3 days later. It appeared without warning, simply materializing in orbit around Linda's research station. The station's sensors had not detected its approach. One moment the space around the moon was empty. The next moment a massive vessel hung there like a silver blade. Linda had told no one about her decision. She packed a small bag with clothes and research equipment, left a message for her colleagues saying she was taking personal leave, and boarded the shuttle that the human ship sent down. The shuttle pilot was a young woman named Kate Morrison. She had red hair tied in a practical braid and a friendly smile that did little to calm Linda's nerves. First time leaving council space, Kate asked as the shuttle lifted off. First time meeting humans, Linda admitted. You are not what I expected. Let me guess, you expected us to be taller, more intimidating, maybe glowing with deadly radiation. Linda laughed nervously. Something like that. The stories make you sound like warriors from ancient legends. Kate's smile faded. We can be warriors when necessary, but mostly we are just people trying to survive our own mistakes. You will understand when we reach the Fleet Garden. Fleet Garden. You will see. The journey took 6 days. The human ship traveled faster than anything Linda had experienced, moving through jump points in space that should not exist according to council physics. Peter Shaw met her in the ship's common area on the second day, bringing food that he promised would be safe for her biology. We have prepared a laboratory for you, he said, setting down a tray with strange fruits and synthesized proteins. It contains all the data we have on the quantum matrix systems. I must warn you, however, that the problem is worse than your initial assessment suggested. Linda paused with food halfway to her mouth. How much worse? The degradation is accelerating. We estimate total fleet failure in 150 years, not 300, and there is a secondary problem we did not anticipate. He pulled up a holographic display showing the Ghost Fleet platforms distributed along the galactic rim. As Linda watched, red indicators began appearing on some of the platforms. When a quantum matrix fails completely, it does not simply stop working, Peter explained. It releases a massive pulse of exotic radiation. This radiation damages nearby platforms, causing their matrices to degrade faster. The effect cascades. Linda felt cold. How long until the cascade becomes irreversible? 20 years, maybe less. 20 years, Linda repeated. She set down her food, no longer hungry. Why did you build the fleet with this flaw? Surely human engineers understood quantum degradation. Peter sat down across from her, his expression troubled. They did. But 8,000 years ago, humanity was desperate. We were fighting the hunters and losing. We needed a solution fast, so we built the Ghost Fleet using partially tested technology. The engineers knew the quantum matrices might fail eventually, but they calculated the fleet would last 10,000 years. They believed that would be enough time for council species to develop their own defenses. But we have not, Linda said quietly. We have relied on your fleet instead of building our own strength. Yes, Peter agreed. Though I do not blame you. Why struggle to build weapons when you have guardians in the dark? But now those guardians are failing and we must find a solution together. Linda looked at the cascading red indicators on the holographic display, platforms dying one by one, each failure hastening the next. What if we cannot fix it? She asked. Peter met her eyes. Then humanity will have to return to the galaxy, and that terrifies us more than you can imagine. The Fleet Garden was not what Linda expected. She had imagined a military installation, all steel and efficiency. Instead, the human ship emerged from its final jump into a system that looked like a cosmic greenhouse. Thousands of habitats orbited a yellow star, connected by networks of light bridges and transport tubes. But between the habitats, filling the spaces where warships and defense platforms should be, were gardens. Actual gardens enclosed in crystalline domes growing under artificial sunlight. This is human space. Linda pressed her face against the observation window, staring in wonder. I expected weapons and factories. Kate stood beside her, looking out at the gardens with obvious pride. We have those too. But after the Civil War that nearly destroyed us, humanity made a choice. We would focus on growing things instead of destroying them. Every habitat here is required to maintain gardens. It reminds us what we are trying to protect. It is beautiful, Linda whispered. It is fragile, Kate corrected gently. That is the point. Beauty and fragility go together. We learned that the hard way. The ship docked at a habitat called New Vancouver. Peter and Kate escorted Linda through corridors filled with humans going about their daily lives. Children played in parks under dome ceilings that showed synthesized skies. Adults worked in laboratories and workshops, creating art and technology side by side. Music drifted from open doorways. Linda had expected humans to be grim and militaristic, shaped by their violent past. Instead, they seemed almost peaceful, though she noticed how their eyes tracked movement with predator awareness, how they moved with unconscious efficiency, even in leisure. The engineering facility was built into the habitat's central core. Peter led her into a laboratory 3 times larger than her entire research station. Dozens of human scientists worked at stations arranged in a circular pattern around a central holographic display showing the Ghost Fleet. A woman in her 60s approached them. She had gray hair and sharp green eyes that studied Linda with intense interest. "Dr. Cruz, I am Helen Park, Chief Engineer of the Ghost Fleet Recovery Project. Welcome to our nightmare." Helen gestured to the holographic display. "We have been trying to solve this problem for 3 months, ever since our long-range sensors detected the first matrix failures. We have run 10,000 simulations. None of them work." "Why not?" Linda asked. "Because the quantum matrices are integrated into every system on each platform," Helen explained. "We cannot replace them without completely rebuilding each unit. That would require us to send engineering crews to all 37,000 platforms. Even with our fastest ships, it would take 50 years. The cascade failure will happen in 20. Linda walked closer to the display, studying the failing platforms. An idea was forming in her mind based on her research into ancient power systems. "What if we do not replace the matrices?" she said slowly. "What if we stabilize them instead?" Helen frowned. "We have tried every stabilization protocol we know. Quantum coherence cannot be restored once it begins degrading." "Not with human technology," Linda agreed. "But I have studied power systems from 70 different extinct civilizations. The Anari species, who lived 12,000 years ago, developed a method for quantum field reinforcement using harmonic resonance. They used it to extend the lifespan of their star drives." Peter leaned forward. "Did it work?" "It worked perfectly," Linda said. "Their drives lasted 3 times longer than designed. But the Anari never applied the technique to weapon systems. I think it could work on the quantum matrices if we modify the resonance frequencies." Helen pulled up a new set of data. "Show me." For the next 6 hours, Linda worked with the human engineers, sharing everything she knew about Anari harmonic resonance. The humans absorbed the information with frightening speed, their minds making connections she had not considered. Together, they began building a theoretical framework for quantum matrix stabilization. By the end of the first day, they had a working hypothesis. By the end of the first week, they had a prototype device. The test was conducted on a Ghost Fleet platform that had failed 2 months earlier. Peter and Linda traveled to the platform in a small engineering shuttle, carrying the prototype stabilization device in a secured container. The dead platform hung in space like a monument to human ambition. It was massive, larger than most Council warships, its dark surface showing no signs of life. Linda felt a chill as they approached. This machine had protected the galaxy for 8,000 years, and now it was nothing more than drifting metal. "Are you afraid?" Peter asked as they suited up for the exterior work. "Yes," Linda admitted. "What if this does not work? What if we cannot save the fleet?" Peter checked the seals on his suit. "Then we try something else. Humans are very good at solving problems when we are desperate. It is one of our few reliable qualities." They exited the shuttle and made their way across the platform's surface. Linda carried the stabilization device while Peter navigated using magnetic boots. The platform's hull was scarred from 8 millennia of micrometeor impacts and cosmic radiation. They found the access port near what Peter called the quantum matrix chamber. He opened it with a specialized tool, revealing a shaft that led into the platform's interior. Inside, the platform was a maze of conduits and processing nodes. Everything was dark and cold, preserved in the vacuum of space. Peter led them through corridors that had not been traveled in 8,000 years, following a map that existed only in his suit's computer. The quantum matrix chamber was at the platform's core. When Peter illuminated it with his suit lights, Linda gasped. The chamber was beautiful. The quantum matrix itself was a sphere of crystalline material suspended in a field of barely visible energy. Even dead, it glowed faintly with residual power, casting rainbow patterns across the chamber walls. "This is what they built," Peter said quietly. "This is what my ancestors created to protect people they would never meet." Linda carefully positioned the stabilization device next to the matrix sphere. The device was small, barely larger than her fist, but it contained the combined knowledge of two civilizations separated by 12,000 years. "Activating now," she said, her fingers trembling as she entered the activation sequence. The device hummed to life. Harmonic frequencies began broadcasting into the quantum matrix, resonating with the degraded structure, reinforcing the failing quantum fields. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then the matrix sphere blazed with light. The energy field surrounding it stabilized, strengthened, and expanded. Throughout the platform, systems began reactivating one by one. Lights flickered on in the corridors. Power flowed through conduits. The platform was waking up. Linda checked her readings. The quantum coherence level was rising, climbing from 15% back toward operational parameters. 30%, 50%, 70%. It stopped at 85% and held steady. "Did it work?" Peter asked. Linda was crying inside her helmet, tears of relief floating in the zero gravity. "It worked. The matrix is stable. It will last another 10,000 years at this coherence level." Peter grabbed her in a clumsy hug, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. Around them, the Ghost Fleet platform continued its revival, systems that had been dark for months returning to life. The next 3 months were the most intense of Linda's life. Working with the human engineering teams, she helped design automated deployment systems that could install stabilization devices on every Ghost Fleet platform without manual intervention. The humans manufactured 37,000 devices using fabrication technology that amazed her with its speed and precision. Each device was loaded onto a small autonomous drone programmed to navigate to a specific platform, install the stabilizer, and verify successful activation. The drones were launched in waves, spreading across the galaxy like seeds on the wind. Linda watched from New Vancouver as the holographic display updated with each successful installation. Green indicators replaced red ones, slowly at first, then faster as the drone fleet reached more platforms. Helen Park stood beside her, monitoring the progress with obvious satisfaction. "You saved us," Helen said simply. "Your knowledge of ancient civilizations provided the key we needed." "We saved each other," Linda corrected. "I had the theory, but you had the engineering skill to make it real. Neither of us could have solved this alone." "That is an important lesson," Helen said thoughtfully. "Perhaps one the galaxy needs to learn." Over the following weeks, as the stabilization project neared completion, Linda found herself growing comfortable in human space. She made friends among the engineers, learned to appreciate human food and music, and discovered that humans were not the dangerous monsters of legend. They were people who had made terrible mistakes and learned from them. But she also saw glimpses of what made them frightening. She watched human soldiers training in combat simulations that emphasized speed, creativity, and ruthless efficiency. She observed their manufacturing facilities that could produce weapons or tools with equal facility. She understood why they had chosen exile. The capacity for violence lived in them like a sleeping predator, controlled but never truly tamed. One evening, Peter found her sitting in one of the habitat's gardens, watching synthetic stars appear in the dome ceiling as the lighting system simulated nightfall. "You have been quiet today," he observed, sitting on the bench beside her. "I have been thinking," Linda said, "about what happens next. The Ghost Fleet is saved, which means I should return to Council space, but I do not want to leave." Peter nodded slowly. "You are welcome to stay. We could use more scientists who understand the bridge between human technology and Council knowledge, but you must understand what that choice means." "I would be leaving my people," Linda said. "My species, my culture, everything I knew before coming here." "Yes," Peter agreed, "though you would not be the first. 17 other Council species members have chosen to live in human space over the past century. They form a small community here, bridge builders who help us understand the galaxy we left behind." Linda looked at the artificial stars. "What if I want to do both? Stay here but also share what I have learned with the Council. They need to know that humans are not monsters. They need to understand that we can work together." "That is more complicated," Peter said. "The Council classified your original report about the Ghost Fleet failures. They do not want to admit the fleet was dying or that we worked together to save it. They prefer the comfortable myth of human guardians who need nothing from anyone. Then I will make them listen, Linda said firmly. I will tell them the truth whether they want to hear it or not. Linda returned to Council space on a human transport ship that dropped her at the edge of the outer territories. From there, she took a commercial liner back to the core worlds, carrying with her a data crystal containing the complete record of the Ghost Fleet stabilization project. The Galactic Council refused to see her for 2 weeks. When they finally granted her an audience, it was in a small administrative chamber, not the main council hall. Only 5 ambassadors attended, including Kelrix of the Voth Collective. Linda stood before them and told her story. She explained the quantum matrix degradation, the collaboration with human engineers, the solution they had developed together. She showed them data proving that the Ghost Fleet had been saved through cooperation between species. When she finished, Director Pax spoke from his seat at the center of the group. "This information will remain classified," he said coldly. "The galaxy does not need to know that the Ghost Fleet nearly failed or that we required human assistance. It would undermine confidence in our security. It would undermine your pride," Linda shot back, anger making her bold. "You do not want to admit that humans are not just weapons we can call upon when convenient. You do not want to admit that they are people who helped us because we asked, not because they owed us anything." "Dr. Cruz," Pax said warningly. "No," Linda interrupted. "I will speak. The galaxy needs to know the truth. We are not strong enough to survive on our own. We need allies, not guardians. We need cooperation, not dependence. The humans understand this. Why can we not?" Kelrix stood up suddenly, his movement drawing everyone's attention. "She is right," he said quietly. "I have thought about this for months, ever since the Ghost Fleet saved us from the Hunters. We treat humans like myths because it is easier than treating them like equals. We want them to protect us without challenging us, to save us without making us feel weak." He looked directly at Director Pax. "But Dr. Cruz has shown us a different path. She went a human space as an equal, shared her knowledge, learned from theirs, and together they solved a problem neither could solve alone. That is not weakness, that is wisdom." The chamber fell silent. Linda saw the other ambassadors exchanging uncertain glances. Finally, Director Pax sighed deeply. "What do you propose?" "Declassify the report," Kelrix said. "Share the truth about the Ghost Fleet failures and how they were fixed. Open formal diplomatic channels with human space. Stop treating them like guardians and start treating them like neighbors." "The galaxy will panic," Pax argued. "They will fear that humans might return and conquer us all." "Then we explained that humans had 8,000 years to conquer us and chose not to," Linda said. "We explained that they exiled themselves because they feared their own capacity for violence. We explained that they saved the Ghost Fleet because they care about protecting the galaxy, not ruling it." She held up the data crystal. "This is proof that cooperation works. This is proof that humans and council species can build something together. Are we brave enough to share it?" Director Pax stared at the crystal for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "We will present this to the full council," he said. "Let them decide." The full council session was held 3 weeks later. Linda presented her findings to all 73 ambassadors, showing them the data, the images from human space, and the recordings of her conversations with Peter and Helen. She left nothing out. The debate that followed lasted for 6 hours. Some ambassadors argued that humans should remain isolated, that contact would only bring danger. Others insisted that humanity deserved recognition for protecting the galaxy. Still others worried about what it would mean to acknowledge that the mighty Ghost Fleet had needed saving. In the end, the vote was narrow but decisive. The council agreed to declassify Linda's report and open diplomatic channels with human space. The galaxy's reaction was everything Director Pax had feared and more. News networks exploded with speculation about human intentions. Panic spread through some colonies. Conspiracy theories flourished. But there were also voices of hope. Scientists excited about potential collaboration. Historians eager to learn about human civilization. Young people curious about the species who had protected them from the shadows. And slowly, gradually, the fear began to fade. It helped that humans made no aggressive moves. sent no fleets, made no demands. They simply opened communication channels and waited patiently for the galaxy to adjust. 6 months after Linda's testimony, the first official diplomatic exchange took place. A council delegation traveled to human space, while a human delegation visited the core worlds. Neither side came bearing weapons. They came bearing gifts of knowledge, art, and hope for the future. Linda watched the ceremony from the council chamber, standing beside Kelrix. The human delegation was led by Admiral Nicole Hayes, who had commanded the Ghost Fleet during the Hunter Crisis. She stood before the assembled ambassadors with quiet dignity. "We thank you for this opportunity," Hayes said. "Humanity has been alone for 8,000 years. We chose that isolation to protect you from us, but Dr. Cruz has shown us that isolation is not the answer. Connection is, cooperation is, not because we are weak separately, but because we are stronger together." She paused, then added, "We do not ask to rejoin the galaxy as rulers or guardians. We ask to rejoin as partners, as equals who can learn from each other and grow together. Will you accept us?" The vote was unanimous. As the chamber erupted in applause, Linda felt tears on her face. She had traveled to human space expecting to find monsters. Instead, she had found people. Flawed, dangerous people who had learned to control their worst impulses and nurture their best qualities. Kelrix put a hand on her shoulder. "You did this. You bridged the gap between myth and reality." Linda shook her head. "We all did this. Humans, council species, everyone who chose hope over fear. That is the real lesson here. The Ghost Fleet could protect us from external threats, but it could not protect us from our own fear and pride. Only we could do that." She looked at the holographic display showing the Ghost Fleet, now fully stabilized and operating at peak efficiency. 37,000 platforms standing guard along the galactic rim, no longer the work of mysterious guardians, but a shared legacy between humans and the species they had once protected from the shadows. The platforms would stand for another 10,000 years, maybe more. But they would not stand alone. Beside them, council species were already building their own defense systems, learning from human technology while contributing their own innovations. The age of guardians was over. The age of partnership had begun. And in the fleet garden orbiting that yellow star in human space, new plants grew in the crystalline domes. Council species had sent seeds, a gift of life to add to humanity's gardens. The plants thrived in the carefully controlled environment, their alien colors blending with Earth species to create something entirely new. Peter Shaw stood in one of those gardens, watching the hybrid ecosystem with satisfaction. Beside him, Kate Morrison was teaching a group of young council scientists how to care for the plants, humans and aliens working together in the soil. "Do you think it will last?" Kate asked him. "This peace we have built." Peter considered the question carefully. "I think it will last as long as we tend it like we tend these gardens. Peace is not automatic. It requires constant work, constant attention, constant willingness to grow together instead of apart." "That is a very human answer," Kate said with a smile. "It is a gardener's answer," Peter corrected. "Which is what we all are now, gardeners of the galaxy, growing something beautiful from soil that was once barren." Far away, in the council archives, historian Vera updated the human section one final time. She removed the old labels of myth and legend, replacing them with simple truth. Humans existed. They had protected the galaxy for 8,000 years. And now, finally, they had come home, not as conquerors or guardians, but as neighbors. And the galaxy, after centuries of being watched over by ghosts, learned to stand beside the very beings who had once protected them from the darkness. Together, they faced the future not with fear, but with hope. And in the gardens that grew between the stars, life flourished in ways neither species could have imagined alone. The Ghost Fleet still stood watch on the rim, but now it stood for something different. Not isolation, but connection. Not guardianship, but partnership. Not the past, but the future they would build together. And in that future, perhaps the greatest myth was not that humans existed. The greatest myth was that any species, no matter how powerful, could face the universe alone. The truth, as Linda had discovered, was simpler and more profound. Together they were stronger. Together they could solve any problem. Together they could build a galaxy worth protecting. And that truth, unlike any myth or legend, would endure forever.